Welcome back to The Rancher's Voice, the podcast where the heart of agriculture meets the pulse of today's industry. From policy changes to leadership stories in the Western lifestyle, The Rancher's Voice dives into the stories that matter most to ag producers. All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Rancher's Voice. I'm your host, Ellie Brighton, and I'm hosting alone today. We are thrilled to have Director Brendan Beatty and the Division Administrator of the Property Assessment Division from the Department of Revenue, Paula Gilbert, with us this week. If you attended our mid-year meeting in Butte, you probably heard an update from Department of Revenue, and we felt it was so helpful that we needed to have another conversation with them and have them back on. So welcome to you both, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you.
So for a little bit of an introduction, Director Beatty, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you ended up in this position?
Sure. It was actually a series of bad decisions and poor judgment. Honestly, I'm a Shelby kid, graduated from Shelby in the 80s, 86, and went to college, accidentally made the decision to go to law school. When I graduated from law school, I clerked for the Montana Supreme Court. And if anybody remembers the early 90s in Montana, there weren't many jobs around. And the only law job that came open was a job at the Department of Revenue as an attorney. And since I had student loans and bills to pay, I took it. And that was 30 years ago. Stayed as counsel for the Department of Revenue for 26 of those years and represented the department in most of its major litigation over that time. And I was done. At the same time, I was managing our family ranch. And when the administrations changed, I said, I'm leaving. I'm done. And one day the phone rang and Governor-elect Gianforte called and asked if I'd like to be the director. And I told him, no, thanks. And three more times of no thanks. And here I sit 4 years and 8 months into the directorship. So it's actually a very short resume, but it's been a rewarding career working for the citizens of Montana.
It sounds like it. Now, Paula, can you tell us about your path to this position?
Yeah, you bet. So I was in real estate for a number of years and started with the department in 2007 as an appraiser, and eventually became the area manager for the Yellowstone County office. And in January of 24, I accepted the position as administrator. So I moved from Billings to Helena and have been in this position since then.
And Ellie, if I may interrupt, she left off an MBA and a bachelor's degree from MSGA and an awful lot of experience as an appraiser and an area manager in Yellowstone County before she became the division administrator. And she became the division administrator not by accident. I hired her because she's the best. And she's here because she came from the field. She knows what appraisal is. She knows what dealing with the taxpayer is. And that was exactly what Helena government needed, was somebody from the field that actually was dealing with rank and file Montanans and the citizenry. So she's done an exceptional job, as you could tell from her presentation before MSGA.
Yeah, absolutely. She's great. Okay, so we are going to jump into the new property tax legislation from this last year. So as everyone knows, during the past session, property tax was kind of at the forefront of conversations, especially towards the end of session. As we wrapped up, there were two pieces of legislation that came out of the legislature that kind of changed property tax classification, rates, that sort of thing. So between the two of you, can you talk us through each bill kind of individually, what they meant, and then maybe kind of how they go together?
I'll take the first stab at that. Okay. I'm an idea guy. Paul is the detail guy. Fair enough.
It works.
So there were two bills, and each kind of deals with a different year. And when they passed them both, they passed coordinating instructions that really, for lack of a better word, makes them one big operating entity bill, right? Mm-hmm. So House Bill 231 dealt with this year, tax year 2025. Mostly, there's some weirdness in there, and it reduced residential rates, all residential rates, significantly from where we sit right now. It reduced ag rates, ag land rates this year and next year. But then it put in a tiered rate structure for residences. And I'll get my numbers messed up because Paula knows the tiered structure. But basically, to put it simply, the more value your home had over certain tiers, the higher the taxable value applied to that amount was. So the more expensive your house, the higher the ultimate tax rate was going to be. It left ag the same.
Actually, ag reduced from, 2.16% to 2.05%.
Except for the residents.
Correct.
Sorry,
the residents, yes. The
yeah.
residents will be the tiered according to value.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I wasn't clear on that. And it isn't until 542 that it changed the value on ag residences. So I'll let Paula talk about 542 because that's going to happen next year. So we have a one-time. Do I have them backwards? Okay, I have them backwards.
So
go ahead.
542, actually, they work together. For this year, there's coordinating language, so it's difficult to really break them apart. But
right.
For this year, what Brendan stated is absolutely correct. Everybody has the tiered tax rate for residential property in 2025. And so those tiers, instead of the tax rate being 1.35% on residential property, which is what it's been in the past, those tiers are now, the value up to $400,000 is taxed at 0.76%. The value between $400,000 and $1.5 million then is taxed at 1.1%. And values greater than $1.5 million are taxed at 2.2%. Previously, if the improvement value of your property was valued at 1.5 million or more, that did receive the 1.89% tax rate as opposed to the 1.35, which was for residential property under that $1.5 million building value mark. So for 2026, that's when the homestead comes into play. And so we can talk about that. Do you want to talk about that now?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be great.
So for 2026, then the difference is that the homestead rate reduction comes into play. So if you qualify, if your property qualifies as a homestead, which means that you reside there, it's your primary residence for at least 7 months out of the year, then you qualify for that reduced tax rate. And so for next year, that means that your value up to the median value of a residential property across the state, which was set at $378,000 right now. That first $378,000 will be taxed at the 0.76, just like this year with that difference in value. Then the median value to 2 times the median, which is going to be the value between 378 and 756, will be taxed at 0.9%. Then the value 2 times the median to 4 times the median, which I believe is, let's see, what did I put there? 1.51. No, excuse me, Ellie, I think I told you wrong. So the median home value, the second tiered rate, the 0.9%, is for values between $378,001 and $756,000, which again is the median price to 2 times the median. The next tier then is 2 times the median to 4 times the median, which is $756,001 to $1.511999. That'll be taxed at 1.1%, and any value above 4 times the median, which is set at the 1.512, is taxed at 1.9%. So that's if you qualify for that homestead reduction. And again, to qualify, it has to be your primary residence. You occupy it for at least 7 months out of the year. If you don't qualify for that, then there's one tax rate, and that will be set at 1.9%. The other way that you can get that reduced rate is for long-term rentals. And we are currently developing a long-term rental application. This is all kind of in the development phase right now. But if you qualify for a long-term rental, which again, means that you're renting it for at least 28 days a month for 7 months out of the year, then the tax rate for those will be set at 1.1%.
Now, there is a little catch in that,
Yes.
which is residential property on qualified ag land. And since this is the Stock Growers Association, presumably most of the viewership or listenership to this podcast will fall under residential property on qualified ag land, because most of us, myself included, our residence on the ranch is owned by the ranch entity, like the LLC or S Corp or corporation. And most of us, or many of us, have employee housing on the ranch as well. All of those properties, residential properties on qualified ag land, their tax rate will be 1.35%. So the tax rate on those doesn't change. The catch to it is, because the tax rate on a lot of other residential property went down and the ag land residents did not, the ag land residences are going to carry more of the burden. The tax burden were reduced on some residences, and it's pushed somewhere. You guys have all heard me talk about squeezing the balloon, and it is pushed in part in many places onto residences on ag land.
The other thing to remember is that in the past, residences on ag land were taxed at the 1.35%. Now this year, they're getting that tiered tax rate. So that taxable value is using those lower tiered rates. However, next year, the residents, if it qualifies for the homestead, that will receive that rate reduction. If it doesn't, then that tax rate will just go back to what it was in 2024 and previously at the 1.35%.
So really, it is, like we talked about, and as people said during session, it's a tax shift, not necessarily a reduction. It's a reduction for some people, but the burden has to remain the same to continue supporting the state the way that we have been.
That's correct. And remember, none of this is state money. It's all local. Even what we always refer to as the state mills, the 95 mills, those are all school money. So there's a common misconception out there that the state's keeping money and operating on this. Not a dollar we're talking about goes to the state general fund or any state operations. It's all schools and local government, local taxing jurisdictions.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And that kind of leads to my next question. Some questions that I have heard from our producers are, so if the burden is lowering, if we're dropping the tax burden for residential people in the state, then are the mills going to increase in the counties? Now, we know that that's not your guys' decision. We know that that is, a county decision, but do you guys have any insight as to what that might look like, and if that concern is something that you guys are hearing as well?
Sure. And I'll address that one. Obviously, local government funding isn't what we do. We just do appraisals and classification. So bottom line, really, depending on what county and taxing jurisdiction you reside in, it could change. So with values increasing, and if the local budget stayed the exact same, mills would drop. So if the counties and the schools and everything else and none of the voted levies happened and the budget was exactly the same, but your value went up across countywide, mills would drop. Now, the tax effect on those dropping mills will vary depending on which class of property we're talking about. So the higher the class of property you've got, the higher the tax rate you've got, the more the shift is going to go on to you. Even though the mills will go down, your percentage won't be as big a drop as certain others.
Okay, so it just depends.
I hate that answer. It just depends, but it's very fact specific, and it varies very much across the counties. In counties that have a heavy presence of centrally assessed utilities, a good example would be Cascade County, where there's a whole bunch of Northwestern Energy's dams. A whole bunch of the burden gets pushed onto them, and residences and ag and a number of others get a break. In counties like where I live, in Petroleum County, there is nothing except ag land and houses. And ag land is going to and residences are going to pick up the shift. So it's very, very tax jurisdictional dependent when you say it depends. And it depends on who the taxpayers are.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I do want to touch a little bit on commercial properties as well, because I think that plays into what you just said about the differences in your county and what kind of properties we're looking at. So, could you just talk a little bit about what these bills have done for commercial properties?
You bet. So in the past, commercial was all commercial property was taxed at 1.89% was the tax rate set for commercial property. For 2025, then that changed again. We just have two tiers for commercial properties. So for this year, commercial properties valued up to $400,000 are taxed at 1.4%. And then for the value that exceeds that $400,000, that tax rate goes back to the 1.89%. For next year, then we get the tiered tax rate using the median. And the first 6 times the median value, which I believe the median commercial value is $356,000. So for values that are up to 6 times the median, so 6 times the 356, those will be taxed at 1.5%. And then values greater than 6 times the medians will be taxed at the 1.9%.
So I'm going to ask you a question, Ellie. When you say commercial properties, commercial properties that Paula was just discussing were like your storefronts in Main Street Car. That's different than an oil refinery, a gas shack, and a sawmill or what have you, just to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking of the smaller businesses just as far as, we as ranchers depend on them, as well. And so I think it's just important to consider what our fellow industry people are going to be facing as well. So,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have talked about ag rates. Can we go a little more specifically? I guess, I mean, we talked about the fact that it's going to depend on the county, right? But how do you see that impacting producers? I understand that, again, like I just said, it depends on the county. And we have, we see a decrease in that rate there. But I've, heard concerns that, the burden's going to shift onto them like we talked about, like it being based on that county. So I guess I just wanted to get a little more of a sense of kind of what you guys are thinking and seeing there. I know it's all still kind of up in the air and you're still working through what everything's going to look like. But I just wanted to go into a little more detail on that.
I'll take a shot at that because I've looked at this year's taxable values, certified values statewide, and what a general story would look like if budgets stayed exactly the same. And it's actually really complex. And I used two pretty good examples, the difference between Cascade County and Petroleum County. So in Cascade County, Northwestern Energy and Calumet Refining and Montana Renewables and more of the industrial stuff up on the hill there, a bunch of the tax burden, if it stayed the same, is going to be pushed on to those. Ag land and residences doesn't take as big of a piece of the shift because there are these other taxpayers that have a whole bunch of value and higher tax rates. We're talking about these tax rates that we in ag have. Northwestern Energy's tax rate is 12%. So when you take all that value and then shift the mills onto it, it pushes more of the burden onto Northwestern Energy. If we go to Petroleum County, where there's virtually no industry and a handful of commercial buildings, most of the tax base, the vast majority, 90% of the tax base is ag land and ag improvements. It's going to take value from the primary residences in Winnett, the county seat, the only town there, and it's going to squeeze that balloon and it's going to squeeze the burden out. If the budget stays the same, the mills are going to have to rise, and it's going to push more of those mills onto the properties with the higher tax rates. Yellowstone County has its own thing. It's got a lot of industry, a lot of commercial, a bunch of ag land too, but as a percentage, its value of ag land is so much smaller than petroleum's that more burden gets pushed on to the industrial and the commercial properties away from the residences. So it's so county specific. In Carter County, most of their value is in centrally assessed value of pipelines. It just pushed all the burden. There's going to be an extremely low burden on the residences in Carter County because the centrally assessed pipeline is going to pick up the lion's share of that burden. So it's really specific to your county and depending on what you have there.
Particularly for those counties that just, like Brendan said, in Petroleum County, if everybody gets a reduced rate this year, which that's how that's going to work. It's mostly ag. Everybody got a reduced rate, and the tiered rate for residential. That total taxable value coming into that county is now less. And if they do have the same budget, the mills will have to float up to cover that same budget amount. And so, like Brendan said, it really depends on where you live as to how this shift is going to impact you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we touched on it a little bit earlier, but the multiple homes piece, especially for ranchers. So obviously if they're on qualified ag land, that's kind of a different scenario, but I know there's people that have a house in town and a house on their place. So what is that going to look like?
Well, on its face, that house in town would be a second home, and it would be treated as such by the legislation. Now, if you have a house in town and you rented it long-term, then it would be a long-term rental. Or if part of your family lived in it as their primary residence, it would be a primary residence. And again, that depends on what it's owned by. If the ranch business entity owns it, by definition, it can't be a principal residence unless it's a long-term rental. And then it's treated as a long-term rental. So yes, this is going to impact a lot of ag operations because there's a lot of ranch families with a house in town. And there's a lot of ranch farm families with a house at the lake too, or grandma's house in Fort Benton or what have you. So there will be some impacts from this.
Definitely. Okay, so as we kind of tie this all up together into a bow, can you guys talk a little bit about what you guys are working on moving forward as far as implementation processes, that sort of thing? Like, where are you at? A status update, I guess. I know you guys are still figuring everything out, but a little bit of an update there.
Paula's making me do. Oh no, Paula's going to do it. Awesome, since she is the one that implements it.
So there's a whole lot going on right now. Again, trying to stand this up has been a challenge. So I can give you a few updates, and that is basically that we are currently trying to put together what that homestead application looks like. It will be fairly easy, similar to what the rebate application looks like right now. But again, nothing's been finalized. The same with the long-term rentals. We just don't have anything developed at this time. However, we do have a website. If you go to homestead.mt.gov, that provides the information that regarding what's going on with the 2026, that whole application process and what we know right now. We will continue to update that as we develop this program a little bit further. But right now we're still in the early stages. So I don't have a lot of updates at this time. They're coming.
Well, one thing we did do is we implemented 2025.
Right.
And it was a rush job.
Yeah.
Because we had less than 2 months to get this up and running, and Paula and her crew did an extraordinary job because you don't just push a button. This was major software changes. A whole lot of work happened in a very, very short period of time on top of the work they already had to do, which was getting appraisals out the door. They did. I could not be more proud of Paula and her crew for getting done what they got done, because it was a big ask. So 2025, we're half done with this thing. We got 2025 done. Now we've just got to get on to 2026.
Well, it sounds like you're in a good spot then. Are there any other updates, I guess not related to this legislation, that our members should be aware of?
Well, the big one, which does relate to this legislation, is if you do qualify for a primary residence, there is a $400 property tax rebate that began this year on Friday. And last I looked, there had already been well over 80,000 applicants for their $400 property tax rebate. And so if you qualify or you think you qualify, please go to getmyrebate.gov and apply, because it is your money. And if you're entitled to it, you should get it. We'll do everything we can to help you get it.
We like that. So my final question is just where people can go if they have questions. So I know you said the Homestead website, which we can link, same thing, Get My Rebate, we can link that. Is there anywhere else that has kind of a good place that has all that information together or someone to contact? Either way.
Our website is just revenue.mt.gov, and you can get to the Homestead page using the links in there. As far as contacting, you can certainly reach out to Brendan or I via email, or we have our help desk, a call center that can answer most of the questions that come in. But anything specific, you can certainly direct those to myself or Brendan. And Ellie, I did want to restate something, because I think I gave incorrect information on that long-term rental piece. On the long-term rentals, if a property qualifies as a long-term rental for 2026, they will get those same tiered rates as the residential property using the medians. I think what I told you to begin with was on multifamily properties, and the multifamily rate for 2026 is a flat rate of 1.1%. And I didn't want to confuse the two, so just wanted to clarify there. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that if folks don't qualify for the rebate and need to apply for the homestead reduced tax rate, the window for those applications will open on December 1st. Again, all that information will be on that homestead.mt.gov website. But the window will open December 1st and run through March 1st. So everyone needs to make sure that they get qualified for that if appropriate.
And we're going to be running a really extensive public information campaign to make sure we can get everybody to listen to know when they got to do things.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I know for me personally, my husband and I bought a house this year, so we're not going to qualify for 2024's, rebate, but we're going to need to get it all figured out for 2026. So that kind of information is super helpful for us. So I appreciate it. All right. Well, that's it for questions. I really appreciate you guys making this work and coming on and answering my long-winded questions. I am grateful for that, and thank you for sharing your insights.
Thanks,
Thank
Ellie.
you for having us.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe everywhere you listen to podcasts, and we'll see you next week.